we have discussed that demand for a product is sensitive or responsive to price change. The variation in demand is, however, not uniform with a change in price. In case of some products, a small change in price leads to a relatively larger change in the quantity demanded. For example, a decline of 1% in price leads to an 8% increase in the quantity demanded of a particular product. In such a case, the demand is said to be elastic because the quantity demanded was more responsive to the price. However, there are other products where the quantity demanded is relatively unresponsive to the price changes. A decline of 8% in price, for example, for a commodity, gives rise to just 1% increase in quantity demanded. Here, demand is said to be inelastic. So, therefore, we can categorize the types of elasticity into five. The first one being perfectly elastic demand. A demand is perfectly elastic when a small increase in the price of a good, its quantity becomes zero. Perfect elasticity implies that individual producers can sell all they want at a ruling price but cannot charge a higher price. For example, if you were to draw the demand curve, a perfectly elastic demand curve would be parallel to the x-axis. This is the price, this is the quantity demanded. So when the price is set at P1, it cannot either increase or decrease. Once it increases by a small amount, the demand actually comes down to zero. So if any producer tries to charge even 1 rupee more, no one would buy his product. So there will be only one price for perfectly elastic demand. So this demand curve will be horizontal and it indicates that the quantity demanded is extremely or infinitely responsive to price. So even a slight rise in price drops the quantity demanded of a good to zero. So the curve is known as infinitely elastic. So here the elasticity, the price elasticity of demand would be infinite. So the second category would be perfectly inelastic demand. It would be the other extreme. When the quantity demanded of a good does not change at all to whatever change in price. So it is not responsive at all. For example, if you draw the demand curve for this one, it would be parallel to the y-axis. So this would be price, quantity demanded, 0. So whatever the price changes, the quantity demand does not change at all. It is totally unresponsive. So in this, there will be only one quantity demanded by the market. So here, the elasticity would be, because it is unresponsive, it would be 0. So the third one would be unitary elastic of demand or unitary elasticity of demand. So when the quantity demanded of a good changes by exactly the same percentage as price, the demand is said to have unitary elasticity. For example, if there is a 30% change in price leads to 30% change in the quantity demanded, so that would be exactly the price elasticity would be 1%. So it would look like the demand curve would be a rectangular hyperbola which gets parallel to the x-axis in this extreme at the right, and which gets parallel very close to the y-axis and be parallel to that. It won't touch it. It would be a rectangular hyperbola. So this would be price, quantity demanded. So these three elasticity, they will have a constant price elasticity of demand, and this would be exactly equal to 1. In this case it will be 0, and in this case it will be infinite. So here another more important thing to note here is that the total revenue can be calculated by price into quantity. So here, because there is a similar change, when the price increases by 1%, the quantity demanded going to decrease by 1%. So the total revenue will not change anywhere along the line. It would be the same. So this is an important point to note. So the elasticity of demand would be always 1 when there is unitary elasticity of demand. And the other case is that elastic demand. If a 1% change in price causes a greater than 1% change in quantity demanded of a good, the demand is said to be elastic. So here it will be close to perfect elasticity. Still there will be a downward sloping. So it will be something like this one. So when there is a small change in price, maybe 1%, there is more than 1% change in the quantity demanded. So you can write it as price elasticity of demand will be always greater than 1. So that would be elastic demand. So normally when you have many substitutes, so if there's a small change, people would go to the other substitute rather than going to this particular product. So it would be more responsive to price. And the fifth and the last one would be inelastic demand. When a change in price causes a less than a proportionate change in quantity demand, the demand is said to be inelastic. So here, if the price is going to change by 1% and the quantity demanded is changed by less than 1%, then we call it an inelastic demand. So for this one, the graph, the demand curve would look like price quantity demanded more towards the perfectly inelastic demand. It would be something like this one. So when there is a change in price, there will be very small change in the quantity demanded. So here the price elasticity of demand, the elasticity of demand would be less than 1%. So these some the essential products would actually fit into this graph. For example, rice, food, and if you have like beverages, clothing, if you take the essentials, because it will not be so much responsive to price. So these are the 5 types of elasticity, and as you can see, there will be a constant coefficient, a constant elasticity for 3 cases: for perfectly elastic demand, perfectly inelastic demand, and unitary elasticity of demand. And in these cases it would change, but in elastic demand it will be more than 1, and for inelastic demand it will be less than 1.